Hi, I'm Virgil. I teach people how to bring their whole hearts to the whole world, and today I'm going to teach you to train love. We've been talking about how the Apostle Paul discipled people across great distance by drawing their attention and their affections to Jesus, and then from there, writing his audience's questions through the gospel into faith, hope, or love. In our last video, we discussed how to train hope, and today we're going to talk about love. Love is the subject of the most of the Bible, so in a short YouTube video, we're probably not going to cover all of it. However, it would be good to begin with a working definition. So the word that Paul is referring to is agape, and it refers to others-focused, self-giving, serving affection. It is emotive. It has affection in it, but it is not merely emotive. And it isn't only oriented toward how I feel about the person or how the person makes me feel. It is oriented toward the other person's best possible outcomes. That's agape. Now, as we attempt to obey the Bible's commands to love our God and to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, we could find ourselves hindered and encumbered by how big that command is. So as we do with all big, complicated, difficult things, we break the movement pattern down into smaller constituent pieces. So here's one way my household is doing that. The other day at breakfast, we sat down and we noticed that love is patient and love is kind. These are the first two descriptors that Paul gives in 1 Corinthians 13. There are a lot more, but let's just start with the top two because that's hard enough. So first, love is patient. Patience refers to the ability and willingness to put up with something for a long time. Some translations actually use the word long suffering, willing to suffer something for a long time. So what we're trying to do in my house is when we notice that something that someone is doing is really grating on us, something that someone is doing consistently or continually or perpetually, sorry about the wind, I can't control that. We're trying to take a step back and ask ourselves, why would a kind person do this thing that this person's doing? Instead of stepping back and going, this person is doing a terrible thing, therefore they're a terrible person, we're stepping back and asking, why would a kind person do this aggravating thing? We're trying to understand the other person. And we're trying to give ourselves a little bit of space to not instantaneously react to the aggravating behavior. I'm gonna move the camera because the kids across the street are super loud. And then as we go through our days, we're just deciding not to react. That's a big deal. Just do nothing actually covers a lot of ground. So love is patient, but love is also kind. The word kind doesn't mean nice, and it doesn't mean flowery, and it doesn't mean sending people cards with rainbows on them unless a person really needs a rainbow card. I can't really think of an instance where a rainbow card would really fix something, but love is kind, and kindness here means usefulness. Love makes itself useful. That demands that I consider the other person, what the other person is trying to do, what the other person really aims to succeed at, and that I make myself useful to them in their endeavor. Kindness is oriented toward the other person's will. It is not me trying to be nice just to make someone feel better. Although that's also plenty good. So at our breakfast table, we decided to try to be useful and try to go slow, be non-reactive, to try to just make some space between the aggravating event and my reaction. As we do that, we are not loving more, but we are making room and we are getting in the movement pattern necessary for the love of God in the Holy Spirit who lives inside the believer to rearrange our internal furniture so that it's easier for God to execute love through us in the world. We become more loving not by trying, but by training ourselves to respond to the Spirit who sheds the love of God all abroad in our hearts. Perhaps the most powerful thing about love is that it doesn't terminate in the object of your love, but it actually catalyzes love in the other person. This is underneath what's going on when the writer of Hebrews tells us to consider one another, how we can provoke one another to love and good works. If I love you, I'm going to devote my attention to you. I'm going to turn the whole power of my operating system to you, and I'm going to give you my undivided attention, at least sometimes. And I'm going to ask the question, how can I contribute to this person being able to love and to do the good and beautiful things that God has put in their hearts to do? Living in a house in a lockdown where we can't even get away from the wind, there it is. That person is often a 10-year-old boy or a 7-year-old girl or your spouse. Often that person is a person that's right in front of you all the time, and it can become tiring to pay attention. But if I love you, I'm going to pay attention to you, undivided attention to you sometimes. And I'm going to ask myself the question, what do you need in order to love well and do the good and beautiful things in your heart. Now, as a parent, that's critical because what one son needs, the other doesn't. And what this son needs, a daughter doesn't. I have to pay attention to each kid and ask, not what do they need in order to comply with my wishes because I'm very tired of having my will contradicted. What does this individual human need, which is different from another individual human, in order to be able to express the love of God and to do the good and beautiful things that God is putting in his or her heart. Now, given that our love doesn't become stronger or truer because we try harder, but because we train, and given that that training actually isn't creating love inside us, but it's simply rearranging and realigning our insides through purposeful, intentional, concrete actions of our will that allow the Holy Spirit to move the love of God through our person and into our tissues, transforming us, but eventually ending up in the other person who then loves another person. Understanding that it's not trying, but it's training, and understanding that that training isn't self-reform, but it is alignment with the will of a good and loving God. Understanding all that, what are some ways you have found to train love? Drop them in the comments below.